Our main guy is a busy salaryman, rushing to grab some papers from the warehouse before his next meeting starts. He walks right through the elevator doors, but there's a massive problem. The floor is completely missing. Stunned, he wonders if he missed a construction sign or if the building is literally falling apart. There's no time to figure it out before he's plummeting down the dark shaft, screaming all the way. He wonders how far down this hole actually goes as everything fades into a dark void. Eventually, the sensation of falling stops and he wakes up surrounded by a soft, white light. Finding himself completely pain-free, he starts to wonder if he actually survived the drop. While he tries to get his bearings, he notices a strange feeling on his face, like someone is repeatedly poking his cheek. Opening his eyes, he finds a young boy with fluffy animal ears leaning right over him. The kid gives him a gentle smile and reaches out for another poke, his long, spotted tail swishing happily behind him. Seeing those animal features so close, he starts to realize he isn't in his old world anymore. He stares up in confusion as the boy shouts for his mother to come over. Suddenly, a woman with more long rabbit ears leans in, asking if he's finally awake. Before he can even process the situation, she pulls him close and starts feeding him. Gulping down the milk, he just goes with the flow while she gently pats his head and praises him. Looking at his reflection, he realizes he's actually a baby now with big, sparkly eyes and a tiny nose. He locks eyes with the boy, who is watching his every move with pure curiosity. Suddenly, a massive burp escapes his tiny body, leaving him a bit stunned as the mother checks to see if he's okay. He's actually pretty embarrassed because that burp turned into a bit of a spit-up. Looking at his new family, he still can't get over how strange they all look. While the mom heads out with a basket of laundry, he watches the blonde boy and wonders if they're ever going to take the animal ears off. Reaching out, the boy starts petting his head, making him realize the ears and tail look way too real to be costumes. Then the brother gives him a gentle look and says it's time for some grooming. Confused, he just blinks, wondering what grooming even means for a human baby. Orchid leans in and gives his face a massive, wet lick. It doesn't stop there, as the boy keeps on grooming him like a little puppy. Trying to tell him to cut it out, Peony lets out a shout, but only baby gibberish comes out. He realizes he can't actually talk yet. Their mother watches the whole thing with a smile, noting that humans don't really need grooming. Even so, she figures the boy is just being a sweet older brother. Staring blankly, Peony wipes his face while trying to process why his older brother, Orchid, thinks licking is a normal way to bond. Rather than stopping him, their mother just beams with pride and pats the boy on the head for being so helpful. To the former salaryman, the whole scene looks like a group of dedicated cosplayers taking their roles a bit too seriously. She mentions sending a quick message to their father and suggests getting everyone cleaned up before he gets home. As the water starts spraying, he can't help but feel a bit uneasy about what this family considers a normal bath time. Actually, it feels incredible. He lets out a long, relaxed sigh as the warm water and bubbles hit his skin. Mother washes him with a gentle touch while keeping the water temperature just right. Looking at her work, he figures she's a perfectly normal, caring parent despite the rabbit ears. Standing up in the tub, he takes a quick look down at himself. It's a bit of a relief to confirm that even in this tiny body, he's still a boy. Mother steps away for a second to grab a fresh swaddle for him. While he's just lying there, Orchid suddenly remembers something. He leans in close and asks if babies are even able to use clean magic yet. Staring back in total confusion, he realizes he has no clue what that word even means. Smiling warmly, Mother says she's finally finished getting things ready. She explains that babies need help with their business until they learn magic, but reminds Orchid that humans don't need to be licked like Beastmen do. Peony just stares, wondering if people in this world really use magic as a substitute for toilet paper. Just as things seem calm, a loud rattling noise fills the room and the floor starts to shake. The tremors get way stronger, rattling the entire house as the family braces for what feels like a massive earthquake. Frozen in place, Peony watches the wood start snapping before his brother dives in to shield them from the collapsing wall. Suddenly, a massive figure crashes through the wreckage and bellows his name at the top of his lungs. He screams about a letter he received, demanding to know if the baby has finally awakened to some hidden power. Looking at the mess, Orchid asks if the front door is even okay, but Mother just figures they can fix it later. Suddenly, the man lunges forward with tears streaming down his face, leaving Peony convinced he's being attacked by a total intruder. Instead of attacking, the man starts bawling about how tiny and precious the baby looks. Realizing he went overboard, he apologizes to Orchid, blaming his reckless strength on being so moved. He stares with hearts in his eyes, mentioning how long he's been waiting for this human awakening. Gently poking at the baby's cheeks, he notes that Peony can't even hold his own head up yet. Peony just stares back, wondering why everyone keeps talking about races and awakenings when he's just a normal baby. He leans in close, noticing Peony's eyes have turned a shimmering rainbow color. Orchid nods along, mentioning he noticed the change and thought it was adorable. Pulling the baby into a warm hug, Mother tells them all they're being too cute. Watching them relax, Peony wonders how they can act like everything is fine when his dad just demolished the front of the house. Still vibrating with excitement, the father asks if he can finally hold his new son. Both Mother and Orchid give him a stern look, warning him to be incredibly gentle. As he's handed over, Peony gets squished against his dad's chest. He can really feel the man's strength as he's lifted up. Looking closer, he realizes something is a bit off about the person who just burst in. He stares at the parent's face and realizes this is actually a woman. She looks incredibly soft and cute, gushing over him with a bright, blushing smile. Even in his old world, same-sex couples were a normal thing, but he's still thrown by the sheer contrast between that violent entrance and this motherly vibe. She's the high-energy father figure of the house, despite actually being a woman. Then there's Orchid, the older brother who takes the whole grooming thing way too far. Rounding out the group is his other mother, who is almost forgiving of everyone's nonsense. Looking at them, he realizes they all look like they're in permanent animal cosplay and wonders if he'll be forced to wear ears and a tail next. He starts to drift off, but suddenly, a realization clicks. Peony realizes he doesn't even have a name yet, so the family decides to head to the temple tomorrow to finally get him one. Since he's officially awakened, they figure it's the perfect time to make it official. Just lying there, he repeats the word temple in his mind while feeling a bit of dread. Thinking back to his old life, he remembers babies getting named at shrines, but he's worried this fantasy version will be way more intense. That intensity is definitely a theme here, especially when he remembers his parent bursting in earlier to shout about a letter and a human awakening. Since he's human, his mother explains he doesn't need to be licked clean like a Beastman would be. Orchid looks him over, noting that the little guy still hasn't mastered clean magic to handle his own hygiene yet. Watching them all laugh together, he figures their weird vocabulary is just something he'll have to get used to. It finally feels real. He's definitely not in Japan anymore. Since he can't go back to his old life as a salaryman, he finally starts to accept his new reality. Looking ahead with wide, shimmering eyes, he figures that if he's stuck growing up as this little guy, he might as well give it his all. He settles on a simple goal to be the only person in this wild family who actually has some common sense. He pumps a tiny fist in the air, looking more determined than any infant has a right to be. Keeping a level head is the only way he's going to survive this household. Staring out at the moon, he makes a silent vow to be the one sane member of the family. It's a big promise for someone who can't even walk yet, but he's all in. Even with that determination, the way he actually got here is pretty strange. In this world, couples visit a temple to receive a child fruit that starts the whole process. Orchid watches his mother closely as she nears the end of the term, asking if she's feeling okay. She just smiles through the discomfort, telling him a new life is almost ready. Just before the birth, a glowing magic circle suddenly appears right on her body. That light intensifies until it leaves her body entirely, forming a bright sphere. Watching the glow, the family waits for that ball of light to transform into a real baby, a process everyone here calls awakening. For Orchid's family, the process hasn't gone by the book because their sphere hasn't awakened in 4 years. A delay like this is completely unheard of. While his father visits the temple for advice, his mother stays home and talks to the glowing ball every single day. Despite all that effort, experts warn that the light might eventually just fade away into nothing. Orchid can only watch and wait, wondering if he'll ever actually get to meet his sibling. Just as Orchid whispers a prayer, the glowing sphere cracks and shatters into a million pieces. Drifting down from the fading light is a tiny, sleeping baby. While the rest of his family are beastkin, he has awakened as a miracle human child. Orchid leans in with tears in his eyes, finally able to touch his brother's hand and welcome him home. He eventually blinks his eyes open, still adjusting to the fact that his office days are gone and he's stuck in this tiny body. Orchid is right there to greet him with a bright smile, though the baby is still a bit dazed about where they actually are. As their carriage rattles along, his parents explain they are heading to the temple so he can finally receive a formal name. He just peers out at the scenery, trying to ignore the noise and figure out how travel works in this world. Beside him, his brother shouts in excitement, pointing out that the carriage feels like it's inside a giant soap bubble. Glancing forward, he sees the driver is surrounded by swirling magic and sparkles as they glide through the air. The whole enclosure has a strange, wobbly shimmer that completely defies his old world logic. Stunned, he can only stare with his mouth hanging open, trying to process this ridiculous way of traveling. He's high in the air now, looking down at the world from a carriage that really shouldn't be flying. While a driver in a little hat guides the team, his father keeps a firm grip on him to make sure he doesn't tumble out. Massive wings flap in the foreground, hauling the whole family steadily toward the temple. He looks closer and realizes their transport isn't just a generic bird, but a massive duck. Strapped into its harness, the creature glides effortlessly over the rooftops of a town below. It's a pretty wild sight to process. Even for a guy who's trying to keep his cool, he stares at the giant bird in total disbelief, wondering how those wings can even keep the carriage in the air. Shifting his focus back inside, he notices a large, spotted tail waving right in front of him. Watching it sway back and forth, he finds himself getting mesmerized by the movement. Unable to resist the temptation, he reaches out a tiny finger and gives the fur a curious poke. It feels even better than he expected. Soon enough, he just dives in, grabbing the tail with both hands and burying his face in the thick fluff for some much-needed comfort. The heat feels surprisingly natural, almost like real skin, and he gives the experience a perfect score in his head. As he clings to the fur, his adult brain starts wandering, and he wonders how the tail is even attached or if it can just pop off. Orchid notices the sudden silence and looks back with a soft smile, clearly happy to see his little brother enjoying himself. He leans in close and says it's okay to touch the tail as much as he wants, leaving Peony frozen by the sudden affection. As the driver announces they're finally reaching the temple, the carriage starts its descent toward the ground. Orchid gently pulls his tail away, explaining that it is time to get back into the travel basket for the arrival. Tearing up instantly, he realizes he can't survive even a second without that fluffy fur to hold onto. Then, he lets out a piercing scream that catches the entire family off guard. They all just stare in shock, unable to figure out what went wrong. Completely frustrated, he struggles to get his adult brain to override his baby instincts. It's a losing battle, and he just keeps wailing while feeling pretty embarrassed about the whole thing. When Orchid sees the mess, he kindly offers his tail back as a peace offering. He stays perfectly calm, holding the fluff out until the crying finally starts to taper off. He grabs it immediately, burying his face in the fur with a look of pure relief. Surprisingly, the panic just vanishes the moment he makes contact. With the crisis finally over, the family carriage pulls up to the temple to start the ceremony. The place is a massive castle with towering spires, looking more like a royal palace than a simple temple. Once they step inside, a receptionist greets the family and says the naming ceremony is ready to begin. Walking through the crowded hall, he starts noticing how many different types of beastkin are gathered here. He spots people with rabbit and fox ears in the crowd, eventually realizing even the receptionist has a sharp pair of cat ears. Seeing all those ears makes him wonder if he stumbled into some kind of dedicated cosplay culture. The guide leads the group through a side entrance, moving with a quiet professional grace. Walking down the massive, carpeted hallway, the sheer scale of the temple starts to sink in. Eventually, she pulls open a set of decorative double doors and explains they've arrived at the naming room. Peony perks up and grips the tail, sensing that the main event is about to begin. They step into a massive, shimmering room where a giant blue lotus sits right in the middle. As he stares at the oversized petals, he wonders if this plant is actually where the magic happens. His mother leans down and carefully sets him into the soft center of the flower. He feels weightless, almost like he's drifting on top of calm water. It's so relaxing that he starts to sink into the cushion, letting out a little sigh of relief. Suddenly, a small glowing magic circle pops into the air right above his chest. The patterns begin spinning and expanding, reacting to his presence in the center of the flower. After a moment, the light settles, and it's time to finally reveal his new name. The letters shimmer above him in a soft glow, finally spelling out the name Peony. He just blinks up at the light, looking tiny and curious in the middle of the massive petals. It's official now, this is his new identity. They all smile down at him as they say the name out loud together. Looking up at them, he realizes he's ended up with something really sweet and gentle. It's a cute fit for his new life, and he seems pretty happy with the choice. As the family heads back into the lobby, news of the new name spreads through the crowd like wildfire. One girl with cat ears even rushes over, gushing about how rare it is to see a human in person. He looks around at all the staring faces and realizes he's going to be a bit of a local celebrity in this world. Ignoring the sudden fame, he just goes right back to hugging his brother's tail as tight as he can. The onlookers find it hilarious, laughing at how obsessed the little guy is with his favorite bit of fluff. While he hangs onto that tail, Peony gets incredibly excited, figuring this is his best shot at finally learning about human biology. A priestess interrupts his thoughts, explaining that since he is human, the parents have to attend a special training session. Along with some custom outfits for the baby, she tells the mom she can restock on milk before the lesson starts. His eyes go wide when he sees the cow is actually a bizarre plant-animal hybrid that grows milk bags like a piece of fruit. The massive tree grows right in the middle of a cathedral, turning the whole place into an indoor garden. While Beastman kids run around and play in the dirt, it looks more like a high-end daycare than a farm. Reaching into the leaves, a harvester plucks one of the dark, heavy fruits from a branch. With the harvest finished, his parents head home with a full bag of milk fruit in tow. Once they're settled back home, the family gathers around to start processing the fresh harvest. His mother picks up one of the fruits and carefully starts squeezing it into a glass jar. Thick, white liquid slowly begins to fill the container. After a bit of prep, they've got a fresh bottle ready to go. Peony takes a big gulp and realizes it tastes exactly like the milk he's used to. Still, the fact that his breakfast comes from a piece of fruit is pretty hard to wrap his head around. That train of thought gets cut short when a lion cub suddenly appears, staring him down with huge, intense eyes. Before he can even blink, the little guy starts licking him right on the face, leaving him totally frozen. Suddenly, a girl rushes over to scoop the cub up, scolding Ruka for pouncing on a human. She keeps apologizing while she holds Ruka back, clearly worried about the fragile baby. Ruka just sits there with a dazed expression as his own bottle of milk finally arrives to calm him down. Orchid watches the cub guzzle his milk and figures the little guy probably just wanted to be friends. Looking around, the nursery is a lively scene of parents feeding their kids in every corner. But Peony's family decides it's finally time to head to the workshop. Peony starts feeling a bit drowsy, thinking about how wild it is that every species in this world grows up on the exact same tree milk. He eventually closes his eyes with a complicated expression, finally letting the exhaustion win. He wakes up with a sudden start, his eyes snapping wide open. When he sees the priestess already wrapping up her closing remarks, his heart sinks. The entire class passed while he was out cold, leaving him without a single bit of the advice he needed. Waving his tiny arms, he starts to worry that his baby instincts are making him too helpless for his own good. If humans really are as weak as everyone says, he wonders if he can even survive in this world of giants. He stares off into the distance, wondering if there are actually any other humans around here. Watching a Beastman cub gulp down milk makes him realize just how different the other species are from him. When he catches people looking at him with hard eyes, it's clear he is basically a local celebrity. Still, his parents and Orchid treat him with so much warmth that he starts to feel a little more secure in their arms. Looking out at the busy streets, he figures this is all just a massive case of culture shock. He watches the crowds, seeing people with foxtails and bunny ears strolling past like it's totally normal. The reality starts to sink in. This isn't just a foreign country or a weird dream, and he's not even on Earth anymore. Looking at the old-fashioned buildings and the strange atmosphere, he finally admits the truth. He has somehow ended up in another world entirely. The weight of it all finally hits him, and he can't help but well up with tears. Sensing the distress, Orchid moves his big, fluffy tail closer. Peony grabs onto the fur immediately, finding a strange sense of peace in the texture. His brother just gives him a gentle, knowing look, letting him hold on as long as he needs. Peony pulls the fluffy tail close, rubbing his face against it as the tears finally stop. He finds that just holding on like this makes the world feel a lot less scary. Adapting to the common sense of this world is going to be a massive struggle, but for now, he's happy to just lean on his brother's tail to get by. He keeps leaning on that tail as they head to the temple to get him an official name. While they're there, Orchid sits through a mandatory class to learn the basics of the human race. After finishing his milk, the baby drifts right back to sleep. He clings tight to the soft fur, looking like he doesn't have a care in the world. Watching him sleep, Orchid figures his tail has officially become his brother's favorite security blanket. While the baby naps, the teacher warns the class that humans are incredibly high maintenance and need eyes on them at all times. He leans in, realizing this lecture is way more serious than he expected. The instructor mentions that even a tiny tumble off a sofa can lead to a major injury. Hearing this, he just stares, his pupils shrinking as he tries to process that level of fragility. Back when he was a cub, he used to fall out of trees and walk it off like it was nothing. Orchid clenches his fists, swearing he'll never let his brother slip. To make sure of it, he decides to train his grip strength to the limit. Suddenly, the whole world feels like a death trap. He pictures Peony tumbling down the stairs or even tripping over a tiny pebble in the garden. Even playdates seem dangerous now, since a small bump from another kid could lead to a serious injury. As the teacher continues the lecture, he realizes he needs a massive game plan to keep his brother safe. He freezes in his seat when the teacher adds that in the worst-case scenario, these minor accidents can actually be fatal. One of the other students asks if humans at least grow up to be tough like the rest of them. She explains that humans stay small and soft their entire lives, which means they never get the natural armor beastmen are born with. They can't keep up with other races or survive jumps that beastmen wouldn't even think twice about. As the teacher lists off these weaknesses, he sits there taking every word to heart. Then comes the final warning: never, ever leave a human baby alone. Looking down at his hands, the gravity of the situation finally starts to sink in. He realizes that for Peony, the common sense of this world is basically a death sentence. To keep his brother safe, he'll have to throw away everything he knows about being a beastman. He looks down at the sleeping baby, letting the weight of that choice sink in. If this world is really too dangerous for a human to even walk across the room alone, then the solution is simple. Watching Peony nuzzle into his fur, he makes a silent promise to stay by his side forever, ensuring his little brother never has to face a single step without him. Peony's tiny hand reaches out to grip the soft fur of his tail, finding a sense of peace in the familiar touch. Holding him close, Orchid repeats the vow to himself that he'll always be there to keep his brother safe. It's a huge responsibility for a kid, but seeing Peony smile makes every worrying worth it. A full year has passed since he first arrived in this world as a tiny baby. Even though most things around here are still a complete mystery, he's slowly starting to piece his new life together. Tucked away between his parents and his protective big brother, he ends another day safe and sound in a massive pile of fluff. He's still fast asleep, buried deep in all that soft fur. Tucked right against his brother, he feels completely safe and warm. Orchid is a snow leopard, which is why his fur is always so incredibly soft. Then there's his dad, a massive polar bear who clearly sleeps like a log. His mom rounds out the family as a tiny, graceful fennec fox. Seeing everyone tucked in together, he realizes their animal ears and tails aren't just for show, they're the real deal. It explains why Orchid's tail always feels so warm against his skin, pulsing with life and real blood. Hugging the soft fur tight, he can't help but wonder why he's the only human in a family of beastmen. He decides it's better to focus on just growing up for now and eventually drifts off. Morning hits the quiet house, but the peaceful vibe is about to break. Waking up a bit later, he notices a cold, damp patch soaking into the bedding. He starts wailing at the top of his lungs, tears streaming down his face as he realizes he had an accident. His mom hears the noise and comes over to check on him, wondering why he's up so early. Peony is just frustrated that he can't control his own body yet, wishing he could skip this whole baby phase already. When Orchid offers to handle the cleanup, his mom tells him to go grab breakfast instead since his tutor is arriving early today. As she picks him up, the baby keeps fussing about the damp mess. Suddenly, his mom says a single word, and shimmering bubbles float up to scrub the mess away instantly. Peony stops crying immediately, completely mesmerized by his first real look at magic. He sits among the floating bubbles, realizing this magic is exactly what keeps him clean every single day. Sparkling and refreshed, he finally understands the secret behind his family's daily chores. But, as he watches his mother, the doubt creeps in about whether a human like him can actually cast spells. Still, he figures he should at least learn the basic rules of this world to be ready for anything. Right then, a sudden knock at the door pulls him out of his thoughts. The visitor turns out to be a polite elf woman who serves as the family's home tutor. Holding her wand and an old book, she announces that today's lesson is finally going to cover the basics of magic. He realizes this is the perfect chance to learn, so he decides he's joining the study session too. Getting his way took a bit of work, mostly involving him clinging to Orchid's tail and pulling out his best fake crying routine whenever he tried to leave. The manipulation worked, and now he's officially sitting in on the class with a book of his own. Patting his head, Orchid tells him to be a good boy as they settle in at the table. The tutor kicks off the lesson by explaining that magic is split into two main categories. Anyone can use basic life magic, but combat spells require a special talent. Even with the easy stuff, she says the power and quality of a spell depend entirely on the person's natural skill. Summoning a sphere of water, she explains that while some people produce a muddy mess, a master can create something as pure as holy water. Just then, she gets a bit too animated and knocks her cup over, sending tea flying across the table. She panics and apologizes for the waste, while Orchid leans in to check if she is okay. Turning the accident into a lesson, she says the word clean and summons a cluster of shimmering bubbles. The table sparkles as the mess vanishes. She explains that beastmen usually pick up this trick around age 3 or 4, right as they start being able to take on human forms. Peony finds the whole thing fascinating, his eyes sparkling as he babbles with excitement. It's a bit frustrating that he can't ask questions yet, so he just sits there nodding along while Orchid watches him. Suddenly, Orchid leans in and starts licking his face, giving him the full beastman grooming treatment. This always seems to happen at the most random moments. Even though it is a bit much, Peony decides to just endure the slobber, figuring it's a small price to pay to stay in the room for the rest of the lesson. Orchid keeps up the aggressive grooming until Peony is essentially swimming in spit. He takes it for now, but he's already plotting some serious payback once he grows up. Drenched from head to toe, he just slumps over while his brother lets out a long, satisfied sigh. When the tutor starts explaining how attack magic works, the little guy manages to snap his focus back to the lesson. Suddenly, his face scrunches up and he starts to squirm. Something is definitely wrong, and it's not a mana shortage. As he tries to hold it in, a wet spot starts spreading across his shorts, proving that even a former adult can't win against baby biology. Instead of panicking, he focuses all his will on the clean spell he just saw. A bright wave of light suddenly erupts from his body, surprising even himself as it washes over the mess. Watching the flash, Orchid just stares in silence, unable to process what he's seeing. He can't believe a tiny baby just pulled off a spell that's supposed to be way beyond his age. When the glow fades, the little guy realizes the damn feeling is totally gone. He breaks into a huge, happy grin, thrilled that he can actually use magic. It's the proof he needed that he can really handle this new life. The tutor looks like she's seen a ghost, whispering that this is actually a huge deal. Rushing over to the parents, she tells them they need to head to the temple immediately since the baby just activated his magic. He just stares at them, wondering why everyone is suddenly panicking while they scramble to find a ride. Soon enough, a massive duck-drawn carriage pulls up outside the house. The family bundles together and gets ready to depart, with Orchid keeping a firm grip on his little brother. Watching them go, the tutor realizes that if Orchid is a prodigy, then Peony might be something even more special. That special potential leads them straight to a carriage that looks more like a parade float than a taxi. It is covered in so much glitter and gold that it practically glows in the sunlight. Even Orchid stands there looking stunned by how over the top the whole thing is. Hiding his face, Peony wonders why they had to pick something this flashy for a simple trip to the temple. Once they arrive, the adults explain they chose this popular model to help him relax, leaving him completely baffled by their logic. Once they head inside, a priest explains that the initial preparations are all finished. Looking down, Peony finds several magical charms tucked into his diaper to keep his power from leaking. Still, the father agrees to wait and promises to alert the staff once the magic circle activates. The main hall turns out to be a massive, noisy lobby full of other families, looking more like a busy playground than a temple. Since things were so rushed, the temple staff can only offer some basic snacks and tea while they wait. They settle in at a table, and with kids running around everywhere, the whole scene feels more like a weekend picnic than a medical emergency. Peony stares down at his new charms, wondering exactly when the magic circles inside them are actually going to kick in. Suddenly, a stray ball zips toward them at high speed, but it's intercepted in a flash before it can get anywhere near the table. His father pulls him a little closer to be safe, suggesting they sit further back so he doesn't get caught in the crossfire of the playground. Watching the Beastman kids tackle each other with insane strength, Peony realizes that keeping up with other races is going to be a real challenge for a fragile human. He notices Orchid has incredible physical stats, yet he stays behind to hold his weak little brother instead of joining the other kids. Peony feels a bit guilty, thinking his fragile human body is keeping his brother from having any fun. Looking at the snack, he figures that if he can at least master magic, he won't be such a heavy burden. Orchid catches him staring and gives him a soft, appreciative look while saying thanks. Holding out the treat, he tells the little guy it's okay for him to eat it. Just as Peony reaches out for the food, the mood shifts instantly. A sudden surge of mana starts leaking out, and he realizes with a shock that his magic is about to blow. It's happening way sooner than anyone expected. Suddenly, Orchid flinches as Peony begins to glow, sensing a violent surge of power radiating from the tiny baby. Peony realizes that the disaster he was worried about is finally hitting him. Looking completely overwhelmed, he can only watch as his mana begins to tear through his system. The pain is too much to handle, and he lets out a piercing scream that stops everyone in their tracks. It's the moment they have all been dreading. The magic is finally overflowing. To stop the burst, the adults press a magic circle right against his chest to ground the energy. They explain that this should link his power to his internal organs, making it so he never has to deal with the messy parts of being a baby again. For a 1-year-old, the promise of no more diapers ain't worth the sensation of intense static electricity coursing through his veins. He's shaking and covered in sweat, crying out because the transition is just pure agony. Seeing his brother in such a state, Orchid leans in close to hold him and share the burden until the magic finally settles. He whispers that everything is going to be okay as the intense pain finally starts to fade away. Gently patting his back, Orchid stays right there until the baby stops shaking from the shock. Once the magic settles, the caretaker kneels in front of them and tells the little guy he did a great job being brave. She explains the magic circle will sink into his body over the next month, eventually fading from his skin entirely. Even so, she mentions a lingering concern about his development. Looking serious, she reminds everyone that the little guy is still only 1 year old. Most children don't even start using basic spells until age 3, and they usually wait until 5 to learn how to shape their energy. Since he's starting this early, his magic is going to develop at a much faster rate than anyone expected. The problem is that human bodies just aren't as tough as Beastman, making it likely he'll seriously hurt himself if his magic runs wild again. Since his frame is so fragile, even a small surge could be life-threatening. As they sit outside the temple to catch their breath, the weight of that danger starts to sink in for the whole family. Looking down at the tiny baby in his arms, Orchid clearly has something on his mind. He asks his parents if there's any way he can stay by Peony's side at all times, promising to keep his brother safe from here on out. His father agrees, admitting the whole family was terrified when that magic flare-up happened while they were apart. Looking down at his brother, Orchid wonders if there's something he can build to make sure they're never separated again. Peony just grips his brother's sleeve, realizing he still has no clue how to stop his mono from going wild on its own. Even though it's a big responsibility, the father decides they'll take magic lessons together so Orchid can learn the ropes. Seeing how much trouble he's causing the family, Peony resolves to master his control as fast as he can. Just as he makes that promise to himself, their ride home pulls up, and it's even more over the top than the first one. A massive, jeweled carriage pulled by a giant duck in a top hat. Staring at the flashing lights and glitter, he feels like his brain is about to melt from how flashy everything is. When he starts kicking his legs and shouting to protest the embarrassing ride, the adults completely misread the room. His mom thus giggles and thinks he is dancing because he is so excited. To everyone else, his angry tantrum is just the cutest thing they've ever seen. Since everyone treats him like a fragile doll, Peony realizes he's basically living in a baby carrier now. His brother is so protective that he barely ever touches the ground. Hitching a ride on his brother's chest, he watches his mom go about her day. It's comfortable, but he hasn't taken a single step on his own lately. Even though he's starting to talk and can help with washing up, those legs aren't getting any work. Looking at his tiny hands, he figures staying this pampered is going to be bad for his development. To fix that, he decides to start doing radio exercises, with Orchid clapping along to help keep the beat. Reaching his tiny hands high, he counts out a loud 1, 2 as he stretches. Next, he swings his arms the other way, putting his whole heart into the movement. Bending forward to touch his toes, he keeps up the pace without slowing down once. His parents watch from the doorway, his dad staring at the strange moves while his mom thus gushes over how cute it looks. Seeing how into it he is, his mom suggests hiring a tutor if he loves dancing that much. He quickly shouts back that he isn't dancing at all. His dad looks up from his paper, clearly trying to find a polite way to weigh in. After a brief hesitation, he ducks back behind the news and admits to himself that the kid has zero talent for this. He just doesn't want the boy to get his hopes up and be crushed later. Peony just pouts, ignoring the worried looks as he dreams of the day he'll finally be buff enough to shock everyone. Determined to prove them wrong, he gets right back to his routine. Night falls, and the moon hangs bright outside their window. Back in the bedroom, Orchid begins their nightly grooming routine on the big bed. He carefully brushes through the toddler's fluffy tail to get all the tangles out. Peony just sits there and takes it, looking like he is deep in thought about his next big training session. Suddenly, the boy pulls him into a tight squeeze, explaining that he feels responsible for the mess since he is the one carrying Peony all day. He starts nuzzling Peony's cheek with a blissful look, though it is pretty clear the responsibility part was just an excuse for more snuggles. Orchid finally stops the snuggling to give that messy tail a proper brushing. Peony offers a quick thank you, feeling pretty pampered as his brother gets to work. Once the brush finally hits his fur, he realizes his request actually got through, which is a huge relief. Things are about to get busy, though, since Orchid has to start prepping for school tomorrow. Peony knows his turn will come eventually, and he's already worrying about how his small human frame will stack up against the other kids. At just 2 years old, he's already convinced he's going to end up a lifelong bachelor. He used to think animal ears and tails were just for cosplay, but now he's actually a bit jealous of them. Peony watches him work, thinking that if he had to be reborn as a kid, he really should have been a cool Beastman instead of a fragile human. Looking up, he accidentally blurts out that his brother is cool, but Orchid just shrugs it off like it's no big deal. Orchid doesn't seem to mind and gently tells him to come over. He immediately claps his hands over his mouth, realizing his inner monologue is starting to leak out again. Approaching the mirror, Peony is reminded that even without a tail, he still has to face himself. Looking at the reflection, Orchid tells him his eyes are actually a really beautiful and cool color. He leans in closer after a second, noticing something a bit unusual. Finally, he pulls the toddler right up to the light, squinting at the glass to see a strange shimmer. He can see it clearly now. The toddler has actual rainbow-colored eyes. Staring at the reflection, he's shocked he never noticed the colors before. As they look into the mirror, he mentions how incredibly rare this is, noting that only a tiny number of people in the world share the same shade. The little girl just stares back with a worried look, wondering if something is wrong with her vision. While he tries his best to stay calm, the excitement gets the better of him, and he ends up just burying his face in her hair. She squirms a bit under the sudden weight, telling her big brother he's being way too heavy. Her eyelids start to get heavy as the long day of exercising and excitement finally catches up with her. Outside, a bright full moon hangs over their quiet home, signaling the end of their busy day. Snuggling into her own fluffy tail, she decides that starting tomorrow, she's going to add even more moves to her daily routine to make sure she grows up big and strong. The next morning, Orchid is already thinking about how to keep Peony safe, worrying that her magic might go out of control if he isn't careful. Sitting at his desk with a quill, he admits to himself that he really just wants to be the one carrying her everywhere. He starts sketching out some designs, haunted by the thought of what might happen if they were ever separated. Staring at the blueprints, he resolves that he'll never let her out of his reach. Outside, the birds begin to chirp as the sun finally starts to come up. Orchid greets his mom as she starts her morning chores. He shows her the sketches for a tool that lets him carry Peony while keeping his hands free. She's surprised he came up with something so detailed on his own. Once she brings over a merchant to help, the boy greets the man with a deep, polite bow. This level of respect leaves the craftsman instantly impressed. Laying out his vision, he explains the carrier needs to work in for different positions. The merchant strokes his chin, clearly taking the technical request seriously. Finally, he asks if the straps can be adjustable so they can keep using it as they grow up. The man just looks at him in silence, wondering how a child could be thinking this far ahead. His mother chimes in, suggesting they make it durable enough to last until Peony turns 5, while the merchant just sweats in the background. She figures it's safer to just build a new one later on once the baby outgrows this first version. Fast forward a few days, and the finished four-way carrier is looking surprisingly professional. Orchid is already shouting for his mother to come check it out, practically glowing with pride as he holds it up. He explains all the details, from the antibacterial fabric to the enchantments meant to keep Peony's skin from getting sore. His mom notices the fancy embroidery, while his dad admits it's actually a really solid piece of work. Even so, they both look a bit overwhelmed by just how much effort their son poured into this. He catches their stunned expressions and wonders why they're acting so strange about it. Later, that night in the bath, he checks Peony's skin to make sure the carrier didn't leave any marks. The next morning, the house is a bit of a mess as everyone rushes to get ready for the day. Orchid scrambles around, looking for a hairbrush, while the rest of the family calls out to him to hurry up. In the middle of the bustle, a butterfly with a tiny human face flutters down and lands right on Peony's head. She stares up at it, wondering what this weird little creature is. Without a second thought, she reaches out and snatches it right out of the air. Looking closer, she sees it isn't a normal bug, but a tiny girl with wings sitting right in her palm. It is exactly the human-faced butterfly she heard about, looking more like a miniature fairy than an insect. Peony worries it might fly away if they head outside, so she starts thinking of a plan to keep it safe. Before she can decide, Orchid scoops her up and says it is time to leave. She quickly cups her hands together, keeping the little creature hidden as they move out. They scramble toward the door as the family kicks off their busy morning together. While her father offers to help carry her, Peony just stays quiet and waits for the right time to show off her new friend. Every step her brother takes hits the ground with a heavy thud, showing he's actually using magic to strengthen his legs while he runs. Sprinting ahead with his parents trailing behind, he figures the extra weight is actually perfect for his daily training. He zooms through the streets toward the Adventurers Guild, treating the commute like a high-speed workout. This trip is actually a big step for his school prep, since he needs to officially check his magic aptitude. Most magic in this world boils down to the four main elements: water, fire, wind, and earth. As soon as they confirm his attribute, they can head out to buy the right weapons for his future lessons. The speed is actually kind of terrifying, leaving Peony squinting as her hair whips wildly in the wind. She holds her hands close to her chest, worried the poor butterfly might get crushed by all the jostling. Seeing how fast he can move, she figures magic and weapons might actually be overkill for someone with this much raw power. They breeze past other people on the trail, clearly moving at a much higher gear than the average traveler. Just then, a massive white stone fortress comes into view, and Orchid announces that they have finally reached the Adventurers Guild. He stops to check on Peony, who is shivering from the sheer speed of their commute. Even though he tells her she is safe now, her little head is still spinning. Shifting her into a cradle carry, he tries to help her settle down after the rough ride. She realizes they covered a 2-hour walk in just 10 minutes, which feels way too fast for a human baby. Suddenly remembering the secret in her hands, she calls out to him as her head finally clears. She holds up the creature for him to see, excitedly shouting about her butterfly. Staring at the tiny human face, Orchid seems completely lost for words. As she thinks of her parents, she realizes how much her life has changed since joining this home. Finally entering the main hall, they find themselves surrounded by a crowd of busy adventurers. She just looks at the crowds, wondering what kind of trouble they'll run into next. They immediately notice the receptionist is frozen in place, realizing she must have a massive phobia of insects. After a quick apology to the crowd, she says there's an urgent matter and closes her booth. Her eyes go wide and she covers her mouth as she takes another look at the tiny creature Peony is holding. She regains just enough composure to tell them she's taking the group straight to the guild master's office. Before they move an inch, she pleads with Peony to keep a tight grip on that thing and never let it go. She starts getting really anxious, wondering if the bug she is holding is actually poisonous or cursed. Walking down the hall, she starts to spiral, worrying that she might have put her whole family in danger. The guild eventually catches up to her, and she starts tearing up at the thought of everyone getting hurt because of her mistake. Losing control of her emotions, she lets out a massive wail that catches Orchid completely off guard. He tries his best to calm her down, but she is way too upset to stop. Suddenly, a massive black boot kicks the door open as someone very scary arrives. Leon towers in the doorway, demanding to know who's making all that noise. He stares down at Peony, who is still a total sobbing mess. Startled, she looks up with watery eyes, frozen by his massive presence. The guild master's tough face instantly shifts when he spots the tiny creature in her hands. Staring at the legendary butterfly, he stands there in disbelief. Shifting gears, he tells her to stop crying and start making some rare fruit, since that's why they came here. Leon rubs his forehead, looking like he's already nursing a headache from all the noise. He mentions hearing reports about a human child awakening with rainbow eyes, confirming she's the one everyone is talking about. Telling them to just come inside, he turns his back to lead the way further into the room. When he asks where she even found that rare fairy, Orchid politely explains their family connection. The little girl just watches him with wide eyes, still unsure if she's in trouble or not. She starts acting out the whole situation, making little poses and talking about the sparkly parts. Waving her arms wildly, she adds plenty of baby talk sound effects to help him understand. She finishes off with a cute goodbye wave, assuming she's explained everything perfectly. Leon stands there with his arms crossed, looking more confused than when they started. Realizing her message ain't getting through, she stops mid-pose and just stares at him. Finally, the butterfly fairy sighs and offers to do the talking before things get even weirder. She strikes a pose and clarifies that she isn't some lowly insect. To her, being called a bug is a huge insult because she's a genuine high-class fairy. Getting worked up, she rants about how people always mix her kind up with pixies or spirits. She figures those other groups are completely different and basically have nothing on her. She doesn't stop there, either. Narrowing her eyes, she explains that her race is special and shouldn't be lumped in with common magical beings. Since only people with rainbow eyes can grow the 7-colored fruit, she admits the snack is actually her absolute favorite. Leon listens with a skeptical look, noting that while these humans are rare, he'd already heard rumors about one being born. The fairy explains her kind hasn't been seen for centuries, but she couldn't help coming out to check on the fruit before getting caught by the kid. Despite the legend, Leon points out that the actual recipe is long gone, with no written records left behind. He sighs at the baby, figuring she's far too young to be of any help. Leon goes quiet for a moment while the room falls into a heavy silence. He eventually asks if it's true that being disrespectful to a fairy could bring a disaster down on the whole country. Vianney freezes in place at the thought of a potential curse, looking completely spooked. While the old books show everyone wanting fairy blessings and treasures, he reminds them that their anger is just as massive. Keeping his gaze steady, he warns that it's a power that shouldn't be taken lightly. He points to the ruins of a once great city, explaining how entire nations vanished when they tried to force fairies to produce the legendary fruit. The warning still holds true today, as he mentions that showing disrespect to a fairy is the same as a death sentence for a kingdom. Looking them over, he lets the weight of those words sink in. Suddenly, the fairy starts waving her arms in a huff, shouting that humans were the ones who really started the trouble by trying to capture her kind out of greed. She demands he fix those history books, calling the official records a complete lie. She explains that fairies always hit back twice as hard if someone treats them with malice. Even if a saint or a hero begs for a blessing, they're getting nothing if she doesn't like their personality. Shrugging, she admits she'd even help a villain if she happened to find them interesting. This realization hits Leon hard. He figures those historical disasters happened because a fairy blessed the wrong person, sparking riots that toppled whole nations. Vianney watches them, thinking this fairy is definitely a handful, but probably harmless enough as long as they stay on her good side. Still, all this talk about ruins and ancient history is a bit much for a toddler, and she is officially ready for a nap. The fairy keeps right on talking, explaining how the little one would get huge benefits from the legendary fruit. But when she notices Orchid cradling a nodding baby, she snaps at the toddler for trying to nap mid-lecture. Magic begins to swirl around her as she declares it is time to learn the secret of the 7-colored fruit once and for all. Since Vianney is way too young for a textbook, the fairy decides to just beam the entire recipe directly into her brain. Leon shouts for her to wait, lunging forward to stop the ritual. To him, a toddler's brain clearly meant for a massive magical download. Ignoring his warning, the fairy tells Vianney to offer up her forehead. Contact is made, and a pulse of light fills the room as the dangerous transfer begins. Vianney's eyes snap wide open as a strange, ringing sensation hits her. Her head feels like it's burning, and through the haze of light, she can see Leon watching in shock. Suddenly, her mind is flooded with visions of ancient alchemists working in a forgotten laboratory. From dusty books to strange bubbling flasks, the entire secret process starts to unfold right before her eyes. The world tilts upside down as she gets swept deeper into the vision, floating through a sea of glass tubes and ancient diagrams. It's an explosion of information that makes her head spin, leaving her wondering what all of this is even supposed to mean. Every flickering image of a beaker or a rare flower feels like a new weight on her mind. Orchid screams her name, his face twisted in panic as he watches her start to collapse. As her eyes glaze over, she barely manages to whisper for her big brother before the world goes dark. Still, the fairy doesn't stop, continuing to pump raw knowledge straight into her mind. He catches her limp body, just in time, but the Lion Master warns that she can't handle much more of this without her brain giving out. Luckily, that scary mental overload passes quickly, and soon Lilac is just focusing on heading to the Adventurers Guild for the day. He keeps a close eye on his little brother as the usual morning routine begins. While the rest of the family gets their bags ready, the toddler starts humming a strange tune in the background. Right on cue, he begins his signature peony dance, swaying back and forth with zero rhythm. He starts flailing around with a wild look in his eyes, totally lost in the move. With no beat to follow, it comes across more as a strange goblin ritual than an actual dance. Watching the chaos, Lilac doesn't even blink. He figures anything the kid does is adorable, no matter how weird it looks. As Peony keeps striking these bizarre poses, his brother just stands there with a doting smile, totally blinded by love. He lifts the toddler up as Peony points excitedly, babbling about a butterfly he just spotted. Watching the bug land, the little guy finally stops crying and just stares at it in pure wonder. Through Lilac's extreme brotherly filter, the messy kid looks like a sparkling masterpiece, leaving him convinced his brother is the most adorable creature alive. The Lion Master breaks the silence, asking what happened to the young lady and the fairy he was carrying, but Lilac doesn't even blink as he clarifies this is actually his younger brother. In his mind, he still sees those shimmering eyes and a face that could belong on a magazine cover. While Leon stands there looking incredibly confused by the description, Lilac gives him a sharp look, offended that anyone would question Peony's perfection. Watching the transfer continue, he starts to sweat, worrying that all that information will be more than a child's brain can actually handle. Leon ignores the look, his focus staying on the fairy, who is still forcing that secret recipe directly into the toddler's mind. Down on the ground, Peony looks completely dazed while the tiny spirit hovers over her, feeling like her head is just seconds away from popping. Nabi chirps that she might have mixed in some extra data along with the recipe, but she figures it's probably fine. Oblivious to the damage she just caused, the fairy watches them while Orchid keeps a firm grip on the wobbling toddler. She can barely keep her eyes open, groaning softly as her brain tries to process the sudden overload. Suddenly, a massive wave of images rushes through her mind, filling her head with visions of ancient workshops and tools she has never seen before. With the data transfer finally done, she stares blankly as her brain feels like it's physically swelling from the overload. Noticing her dazed expression, Orchid quickly checks her forehead to make sure she ain't running a fever. He calls her name with a shaky, relieved smile once he sees her finally blink and look back at him. Then he pulls her into a warm hug and tells her she did a great job while gently petting her hair. Nabi doesn't give her a second to breathe, popping up with a huge grin and a pointed finger. Ignoring the fact that Peony's brain just got fried, she insists that making the legendary 7-colored fruit will be a breeze and tells her to get started immediately. Leon watches the chaos with a skeptical look, wondering if the kid can actually pull off something that big. He also mentions that the young lady illusion seems to have finally worn off. Still holding her tight, Orchid can only watch as Peony stares off into space with completely blank eyes. She finally admits to herself that she has absolutely no clue what just happened. Behind her, Leon and the others realize the recipe memory from the fairy didn't really stick at all. Determined to do something anyway, she manages to wobble onto her feet and gives herself a little pep talk. But before she can even take a step, her tiny body gives out and she faceplants right onto the ground. She immediately flashes a big, happy grin, hoping that acting like a cute baby will make everyone forget the request. It's the classic strategy of just smiling through the awkwardness. Watching the display, the guild leader thus scratches his head, thinking she's far too young to even understand the language yet. While he's convinced, Nabi imbibing the act and starts screaming for her to hurry up and make the fruit. Staring up at the tiny, angry fairy, she can't help but feel like the whole situation is completely unfair. Even so, noticing how worried Orchid looks makes her realize the family might get caught in the middle if she stays quiet. She decides she has to try manifesting anything just to keep everyone safe. She brings her small hands together, figuring that at least looking like she's trying is a good start. A shimmering trail of mist begins to drift across the room, catching the attention of everyone watching. Surprisingly, tiny sparks of light start popping between her palms. Her eyes go wide as she realizes something is actually happening. It looks like her shot in the dark actually produced some magic. With a sudden pop, a fluffy cloud of magic bursts into existence right in front of her. She stares at the glowing mist with wide eyes, looking just as surprised as everyone else by the little stars swirling inside. She watches the little stars twinkle inside the soft mass, her eyes reflecting the glow. Floating right in front of her, the magic looks exactly like a giant ball of cotton candy. Nabi starts cheering and dancing immediately, thrilled that the plan actually worked. Between her happy shouts, the fairy claims this is a top-tier magical fruit. Then the fluff suddenly swallows Peony whole, leaving her face planted right in the middle of her own creation. Nabi throws her arms up, making a huge show of finishing the process while the shimmering mist settles. She keeps posing like she's the one who did all the hard work, looking completely satisfied with the result. As she preens, Peony peeks out from the fluff, just relieved that her little act of looking busy actually paid off. Orchid beams and tells her he's glad things worked out, while Nabi finally hits her limit and looks totally drained in the background. Despite looking drained just a second ago, Nabi bounces back instantly and offers to grant any wish, even rare gems, a reward for making such high-quality fruit. Peony exactly thrilled by the idea of jewelry, figuring a 2-year-old has zero use for shiny rocks. Orchid leans in and asks if there's anything at all she wants. Thinking back to her time as a salaryman, she realizes she never really had many big desires anyway, leaving her drawing a total blank. Suddenly, she stops him right there, her eyes widening as she notices something strange tucked inside the pack. She reaches toward the bag, looking like she just remembered something important. She realizes that Orchid always makes sure to carry her, no matter how much stuff he's already hauling around. With a soft look, he shows that the extra weight doesn't bother him one bit. Seeing him adjust his big backpack, she points at it and asks if it's too heavy for him today. Nabi is all for helping out, happily promising to give both her and her brother the item box skill. Waving her hands, she lets out a swirl of dark, starry magic. The energy wraps around the two of them, catching Orchid completely off guard as he tries to make sense of the glowing light. Looking down, she watches the shimmering mist sink right into her stomach. It's a strange sensation, making her wonder what exactly is happening to her body. Eventually, the magic vanishes inside, leaving her to process the fact that she just received a legendary ability. Nabi lets out a massive yawn, mentioning she's heading home for a nap now that the work is done. Before taking off, she gives them a parting tip about putting the fruit in a lantern to attract more spirits to the house. Once she vanishes, the room goes quiet as the adults struggle to process the miracle they just witnessed. Orchid doesn't care about the logic of it all, though, and immediately pulls Peony into a tearful hug. Overwhelmed with gratitude, he calls her his personal goddess while the guild leader watches on, wondering if the kid really is some kind of deity. The guild leader notes that scoring this rare storage gift is like winning the lottery, telling Orchid that very few people are lucky enough to have one. When Peony asks if her family can help her use it, the priestess explains that it's a private vault only the owner can access, meaning her things are safe from thieves. Curious, she reaches into the dark swirl of magic to test out how it feels. To her surprise, everything she puts inside loses its weight and stays perfectly fresh forever. The adults watch in total disbelief as the toddler handles the complex magic like a seasoned pro, while Orchid just beams with pride. Finally, she pulls out a pen with total confidence, acting like she's been using a system like this for years. Orchid gives it a shot too, successfully pulling out an item of his own as the adults watch. Looking incredibly touched, he vows to keep this gift from his little sister safe for as long as he lives. But while he's making big promises, the goddess herself has already conked out on a fluffy tail. Her mother mentions it's way past her nap time, especially after the chaos of meeting a fairy. Watching the sleeping child, the guild leader reminds them that they originally came here to test her magic. He figures they can just do the check right here in the office since everyone is already settled. The leader gets right to work, sketching out a massive magic circle across the floor. He explains that using a ritual like this allows for a much deeper investigation of her latent powers. Glancing down, he sees she is still fast asleep despite all the noise he is making. Because of the circle's specific rules, only Orchid is allowed to step inside to hold her. Just then, the quiet office is shattered when she jolts awake and screams for her big brother at the top of her lungs. It's so loud the sound actually echoes through the entire guild building. She lunges forward and sinks her teeth into the first thing she can find to stop the noise. Her face scrunches up as she lets out a deafening wail that probably rattles the windows. Orchid just stands there and takes it, realizing his tail has become her temporary chew toy. Wanting to avoid another public scene, the guild leader figures it's best to start the test immediately. He tells them to stay clear of the lines as the magic circle begins to hum with light. The magic takes hold, surrounding Orchid in a pillar of light and floating data bits. Stunned by the flash, he watches the glowing particles drift off his shoulders. Suddenly, a status screen flickers into view. Along with fire, water, and wine magic, it lists high-tier skills like self-regeneration and the item box for too much power for a normal 9-year-old. Orchid stares at the floating text, realizing that while his self-regeneration is great, it only fixes his own wounds. Instead of feeling proud of his rare skills, he starts wishing for actual healing magic. He figures that's the only way to protect Peony if she ever gets hurt. Clenching his fist, he decides he needs to train harder and master it as soon as possible. That marks the end of his results. Looking at the pair, the leader jokes that the little one is way too attached to her brother. He considers checking her status next, but figures he should skip it for now. He remembers the old legends about humans being so fragile that a stiff breeze can tear their skin and rain can break their bones. Yet, those same books claim humans have massive magic reserves and mastery over every single element. More than that, they're known for carrying some very unique and special skills. Specifically, legends say they can create holy weapons, making anything from divine staves to powerful shields. These legendary tools are said to appear out of thin air whenever a human needs them. Looking at the pair, the leader admits this kind of power is so wild it feels more like a dream than real life. He can't quite wrap his head around something so legendary being right in front of him. Since humans are still such a mystery, he decides he'll have to keep Peony safe so she can live a long and healthy life. For now, he explains that the guild will need to share whatever info they have on fairy blessings. Pointing a finger to emphasize his point, he mentions there's one more thing on his mind. He looks right at the family and says he wants to put in a formal request for the little one. Orchid and the parents just stare back, wondering what kind of job a baby could possibly handle. She leans in and eats without a second thought while he watches with a soft smile. It's like he has made it his life's work to make sure she never goes hungry. Even though she realizes she's being babied, her mouth thus opens on its own the second food is in range. Bread is a powerful motivator, and she isn't strong enough to resist. Looking at the full table, she figures she is well on her way to being completely spoiled. Still, having her big brother handle everything makes for a pretty easy morning. Mashuda suddenly bursts into the room with a loud greeting, calling her a tiny shrimp. She looks up with wide eyes, totally caught off guard by the visit. Getting straight to business, he asks if she can actually make those 7 colored fruits they talked about. Orchid stays protective as always, reminding her she's allowed to refuse if she doesn't want to. Once they finish checking Peony's magic, the focus shifts back to the request. Orchid asks for those 7 colored fruits again, though Mashuda admits she actually fell asleep while he was talking earlier. Her family isn't just going to say yes without some rules, though. They insist her health comes first, her identity stays hidden, and she won't be held responsible if anything goes wrong. Orchid holds up 3 fingers and asks for enough fruit to cover 3 separate guilds. He figures they can use the treats as bait and lanterns to attract local fairies. Listening to him, she tries to picture the whole plan. Peony asks if she can finish such a big order before the day is over. While fairies are usually wild, Orchid thinks these might be a safer breed. Thinking about those intense fairies, Mashuda worries they might just show up and demand the fruit directly. She cups her hands together and starts manifesting the magic. Small pops and sparks fly as the legendary request begins to take shape. A giant explosion of sparkling smoke fills the room, leaving the Lion Master stunned by the sheer scale of the magic. Once the clouds clear, she is seen holding 3 massive, fluffy fruits that look like soft cotton candy. Orchid watches as his little sister finishes the entire request in one go, proving a triple order is no problem for her. Examining the giant puffs, the big guy wonders if they will even fit inside a normal bag. He looks down and notices his own bushy tail looks dangerously similar to the bait she just created. He shivers and asks her not to let anything bite him by mistake, clearly worried about being confused for a snack. Peony waves a cheerful goodbye to the fluffy fruits, babbling away in her own little language. Watching her, the Lion Master admits he's impressed she can talk so well already. The Orchid still needs a bit of a translation. Soon, he turns his attention back to the massive pile of fruit, wondering how they're even going to haul it all back. To handle the load, he pulls out a special magic cloth that's designed to wrap up pure energy, including things like fire and wind. The Lion Master bundles the massive treats into his magic cloth, thanking her for the hard work. Wiping her brow with a tiny sigh, she feels a strange sense of relief, realizing this is the first real job she's finished since her salaryman days. Once Orchid takes a seat back at the table, she immediately heads his way. She waddles over and starts climbing up his leg without even thinking about it. Laughing, he scoops her up and gives her a squeeze, figuring she just can't get enough of her big brother. While handing her a drink, he mentions the reward from the 3 guilds, asking if she wants one big expensive item or 3 separate things. Orchid holds her while she sips her drink, with the rest of the family watching nearby. Chugging it down with all her might, she realizes her mind is actually completely blank on what she wants. After a loud burp, she thinks about just taking the cash, especially since the fruits didn't cost her anything to make. Even so, being the family breadwinner at her age feels a bit weird, and she knows asking for muscle tonics would definitely raise some red flags. When Orchid tells her she can have anything her heart desires, a much better idea finally pops into her head. She looks at her father with a sudden, intense focus. Remembering the curse that turned him into a woman, she figures this is her chance to finally help him out. With a chubby finger pointed right at him, she shouts out exactly what she wants. Orchid looks pretty surprised, though he realizes the medical guild is probably their best bet for finding such rare medicine. The Lion Master just stands there in total silence, looking like his brain is struggling to process the request. Seeing the confusion, Orchid explains that the kid is asking for a potion to turn her father back into a man. The brother clarifies that while father is physically a woman, his personality has always been more like a man's. Thinking about the kid's logic, he adds that she probably wants him to have big muscles to match his tough attitude. When the pieces finally click together, Orchid freezes on the spot in pure disbelief. It turns out there was never a curse. Father was born female and just happens to be a total tomboy. Since he always talked about getting stronger, the kid naturally assumed he was a man trapped in the wrong body. Orchid realizes that since the father is actually a woman, this whole family dynamic is basically one big adoption. Sweating a bit, he wonders why a group of beastmen would ever go through the trouble of taking in a fragile human child. His mind starts racing with crazy theories about her being created by a magic circle or even spawned from plants and insects. While he is spiraling, Peony just picks up his sister and starts dressing her in a cute outfit. Eventually, he decides it is probably better to just stop thinking about her origin altogether. The little girl doesn't seem to mind the fuss, happily thinking about how much she likes her new look. That happiness evaporates when Orchid starts howling with laughter, finding the whole misunderstanding about her father way too funny. Peony joins in, teasing her that someone so cute should never try to use tough, masculine pronouns. Looking annoyed, she thinks back to how he's treated her like a helpless missy since the moment they met. He always acted like she was some delicate doll, which is the exact opposite of the cool vibe she wants. Fed up with being the joke, she hops down to prove she in just for show. She delivers a sharp kick right to his shin to make her point. Suddenly, Orchid's face darkens as he feels her sink her teeth right into his tail. Not content with just a kick, she flashes a cheeky little smirk before lunging. When he barks at her to stop chewing on his fur, she flips the switch and starts wailing at the top of her lungs. Scooping her up, Peony tries to quiet her down while a frustrated Orchid mentions the guild master is offering a reward to make up for the mess. Mashuta takes a second to think about what she really wants, deciding to pick things that are actually useful for her and the family. Giving herself a little nod, she decides she is ready to make her move. She starts rattling off a long list of basics like clothes and shoes while Orchid scribbles everything down. But the final request is a high-end brush for Peony's tail, which leaves the big brother completely flustered since she apparently grooms him every single night. Moving past the brush request, the Lion Master mentions her current human-style clothes were a special temple gift, so he promises to provide custom outfits made just for her. Orchid listens in, wondering what else is being offered. Shaking his head, the Master figures clothes alone are still falling short since those rare fruits she brought are worth a fortune. That's when the kid sparkles with excitement, announcing that she wants to start investing in gold. He thinks that's a solid choice, since gold works just as well for making high-end weapons as it does for a long-term investment. He starts scribbling down notes while the kid looks on, wondering exactly what he's planning. With a confident grin, he mentions that their budget is big enough to snag some truly top-tier ingots. He decides to personally scout out a few different varieties to make sure they get the absolute best quality available. As the meeting wraps up, he promises to have everything ready for them within a month. Peony figures they can just swing by to pick it up later, right around the time Orchid starts shopping for his new school gear at the weapon shop. Scouting out multiple weapon shops sounds like a great plan to him. Since he hasn't picked a specific shop yet, he's definitely open to suggestions. Leading them toward the exit, Orchid explains that the city has everything from high-end boutiques to humble stalls. He offers to vet a few reliable spots before their rewards arrive, which gets him a polite thank you from Mashuta. Outside, their transportation is finally waiting, a massive, fluffy white rabbit equipped with a saddle. Up close, the rabbit looks incredibly soft, standing there like a legendary royal mount. She stares in total awe, her eyes turning into literal stars as she takes in all that fluff. Giving the family a casual wave, Orchid says his goodbyes and hops onto the saddle to head out. Still, as he bounces away, she realizes she probably should have asked for the rabbit as her reward instead of the gold. A month passes by in a flash, and soon enough, they're back at the massive headquarters of the Adventurers Guild. Waiting behind the heavy doors, the Lion Master announces that all their custom rewards are finally finished. First up is the bunny outfit, looking extra soft with its big ears and matching little bloomies. The collection doesn't stop there, though, as he reveals a whole pile of adorable onesies in the shape of a bear, a pig, and even a tiger. She picks out the lion suit and tries it on, standing there with her brush and a shy blush on her face. With the fuzzy mane and the tiny lion tail, she looks exactly like a little cub. The rest of the group just stops and stares, clutching their faces because they can't handle how adorable she is. Seeing her in that suit, Orchid is convinced that leaving the outfit design to this guy was the best choice they ever made. With the fashion show out of the way, the Lion Master asks if she's ready for the actual reward. He pops open a heavy chest, revealing a literal treasure trove of high-grade materials. It's not just gold either. He's packed in platinum, mithril, and even legendary orichalcum. Looking at the sparkling hoard, she can't help but be impressed that the guilds actually went all out for her. He mentions that most people are lucky to own even one piece of mithril in their entire life. Legendary metals like orichalcum are even rarer, usually only showing up in old books because they're basically priceless. It's the kind of gear reserved strictly for the highest-ranking heroes, making the whole reward feel like a bit of an overkill. Peony stares at the pile, wondering if the simple fruit she traded was actually worth all this. Watching her, Orchid just thinks about how innocent she looks while sitting on a fortune that could buy a kingdom. Orchid leans in and warns Peony that these materials are way too valuable to be left out in the open. He tells her that scary people would come looking for her if they saw this kind of wealth, so she needs to hide it all in her item box. Since she is already a target for kidnappers just for being human, he explains that carrying legendary metals only makes things more dangerous. Taking the advice to heart, she starts tossing the massive ingots into her storage space, humming a little song while the adults watch her work. Even though these materials should be incredibly heavy, she's surprised to find they don't weigh anything at all once they hit her item box. She peeks into the swirling void of her storage, noticing the inside is filled with tiny, twinkling stars. Spotting something interesting, she reaches in and pulls out a heavy, dark slab that glows with its own internal light. While she plays with the treasure, the adults take a break for some tea. The Lion Master asks Orchid if he's finally picked out a weapon to buy, but the boy admits he's still thinking it over. While he weighs his options, Mashuta holds up the dark ingot, and its eerie glow makes Orchid's eyes nearly pop out of his head. She figures it's time to put the treasure away and starts shoving the metal straight toward Peony's chest. The boy's eyes go wide when he feels his own body start to swallow her hand whole. He stares down, speechless, as his sister continues to treat his torso like a storage locker. Reaching even further, she mentions she can feel something else hidden deep inside the pile. She yanks it out with all her strength, and Peony leans back in shock as a long, curved blade emerges from his chest. It's a massive weapon, and he looks like he's about to faint while watching her pull a literal sword out of his body. Looking down at her prize, she holds up a pitch-black katana with sparkling patterns etched into the metal. She seems completely oblivious to how dangerous this is, even as the legendary weapon glows in her small hands. Looking more curious than afraid, Peony clutches the ornate blade that was just pulled from her storage. She lifts it up with ease, acting like the massive weapon weighs nothing at all. Orchid just freezes on the spot, staring at her with his mouth hanging open. Orchid leans in closer, wondering if even more swords are about to pop out of that storage space. Watching the opening carefully, the rabbit girl tries to make sure the scabbard doesn't get sucked back in. As she keeps digging for treasure, Peony lets out a little groan, staring off with a blank expression. The toddler clearly just wants the surprises to end. Nearby, the Lion Master and Orchid sit in a complete daze, looking totally drained. They just watch their tea drip, too stunned to say another word. The Lion Master suddenly breaks the silence, sweating as he shouts about this being a holy sword. To him, this is a legendary human power that shouldn't even be possible to see here. While he's shouting with excitement, Mashuda stays completely calm and just focuses on wiping some drool off Peony's chin. Eventually, the heavy blade falls back onto the table with a loud thud. Sitting back down, the Lion Master explains that the way these weapons are actually made is a complete mystery to everyone else. Honestly, watching him try to make sense of a toddler holding a legendary artifact is pretty funny. He mentions that summoning a weapon is a specific skill only humans possess. Hearing that finally makes sense of why the term sounded so strange before. Waving the sword around, he points out the tiny magic circles carved from the hilt all the way to the tip. While the others lean in to look, he breaks down the massive gap between holy gear and normal weapons. Using a mental chart, he explains that regular swords have strict limits on enchantments and materials, while holy ones have absolutely none. He adds that another great thing about holy weapons is that only the owner can use them. Suggesting a quick test, he tells the kid to focus on the sword and imagine it flying into his hand. Orchid stands back, holding Peony while looking pretty serious about the whole experiment. The blacksmith tells them to move away from the blade for a second so the summoning has a clear path. He explains that even if the sword is far away, it'll fly right back to its owner's hand just by thinking about it. Orchid holds Peony steady as they watch, and a second later, the dark blade flashes with light and zips across the room. The blacksmith sticks his chest out and tells the kid to try hitting him with the blade next. Holding him tight, the older brother starts sweating as he remembers that punch from earlier, worried the kid might actually want some revenge. The veteran explains that a holy sword is special because it supposedly only harms enemies, so there's no real danger. Standing back, he wonders if the kid could eventually make weapons for the rest of the group as well. Focused on the task, Peony stares down at the ground and prepares to call the blade back one more time. Instead of calling the blade, he stops to check their stats and sees skill bars floating over the blacksmith and his brother. Both of them are nearly at the limit for weapon creation, but they're missing the right materials. Shifting his gaze to the rabbit girl, he sees her skill level is a flat 0. He figures his mother wouldn't have the skill either, since she isn't exactly a front-line fighter. He tries to explain these findings, but it just comes out as frantic baby talk. It's hard to discuss crafting mechanics when your mouth only wants to make gibber sounds. The others just stare at him in total silence, completely unable to translate the babbling. Eventually, his brother steps in to explain that they're short on materials, and some weapons simply can't be crafted no matter what they have. Peony clings to his brother, happily telling him how incredible he is for being such a talented crafter. Watching the sweet moment, the blacksmith suggests they postpone the official request for another day. He points out that the holy sword is in much use in its current form and tells them to find a top-tier smith. Then, he hands over a list of recommended shops to help them get started on the custom order. While they look it over, he mentions those special fruits Peony shared earlier, noting that the guilds are already seeing some good results. Predicting that more people will be asking for the kids' help soon, he asks if he can reach out again later, earning a cheerful yes from Peony. Orchid takes the map and leads everyone out into the busy city streets. He mentions they'll get in touch if they need anything else, navigating through the noise of the capital as they head for their next stop. Eventually, they find the shop the blacksmith recommended, and it looks like a serious step up from a normal forge. Standing before the window, Peony stares in wonder, his eyes sparkling as he takes in the high-tier gear. Orchid confirms this is the spot, noticing his little brother is already fascinated by everything inside. They step into the armory, which looks way more polished and expensive than any workshop they've seen so far. A booming greeting welcomes them as they take in the rows of high-end gear. Peony freezes when he catches a glimpse of the shopkeeper. Noticing the man has round ears just like his own, he stares in silence, wondering if he's finally found another human in this world. The big guy leans over the counter with a friendly grin as Orchid asks if he can help them make the katana usable. The shopkeeper's eyes go wide the second he sees the blade. Leaning in closer, he starts to sweat while inspecting the craftsmanship. Peony watches him closely, wondering if the man is a human or perhaps one of the legendary small folk. After a long moment of silence, the craftsman confirms it's a holy weapon made using rare human skills. When he asks what kind of design they want for the final product, Orchid tells him they aren't picky about the looks. He adds that he wants his little brother to pick out the materials himself. Thinking it over for a second, the shopkeeper agrees and offers to lead them back to the warehouse. They step into a massive storage room filled with rows of rare ores, fabrics, and various monster parts. Orchid keeps a steady grip on him as they scan the lower shelves, waiting for something to catch his eye. Suddenly, he reaches out and grabs a piece of material, looking like he's found exactly what he was after. He pulls together a pile of high-end supplies, impressing the shopkeeper with his taste in wood and shark skin. Not stopping there, he starts dumping rare metals out of his storage, leaving his brother and the smith completely stunned. The shopkeeper agrees to the job and even offers to buy back any leftover materials they don't end up using. Since he promises to have the whole thing finished by tonight, Peony is left wondering how anyone can work that fast. After stepping out onto the street, they run into a family friend who says their mom was restless about them being out alone. Shrugging it off, Orchid confirms the order went through while busy munching on a snack. It's a small moment, but Peony feels pretty proud of how well his big brother handled everything today. Soon, he asks where the next armor shop on their list is located so they can keep moving. They eventually settle into a restaurant where Orchid relaxes with a drink and laughs about what a successful trip they've had. Looking around the busy room, he mentions how much easier this was than the days of searching their father used to do. Switching topics, he brings up how happy the kid looked at the last shop, figuring Peony thought he'd finally found another human. With a little laugh, he admits it was almost painful to break the news that the guy was actually a dwarf. Peony doesn't seem to mind though, since he's mostly just excited to be eating out for the very first time. Still, he stops in his tracks when they reach the restaurant, finding a building that looks like it was plucked straight out of traditional Japan. Stepping inside, the place feels even more authentic with its sliding doors and staff dressed in full kimonos. When Orchid asks what he wants to order, the kid looks at the menu with literal stars in his eyes. It turns out this place serves actual Japanese set meals, and he can hardly believe his luck finding authentic washoku in another world. He thinks about how they have rice at home, but kettle-cooked meals are a rare treat. It's actually been since his previous life that he's seen anything like this. Sweating over the menu, he can't decide between the grilled eel or the braised pork. Orchid watches him struggle, seeing how seriously the toddler is taking the choice. Since it's such a tough call, his brother suggests they just order both and share. He absolutely lights up at the idea, declaring that they're sharing the happiness. Still, he's so ready that he starts opening his mouth for a bite, even though the food isn't even on the table yet. The server finally sets the steaming anagi down, and it looks even better than he imagined. He just stares at the bowl, his eyes shimmering with pure joy. Seeing how hot it is, Orchid starts blowing on a spoonful to cool it down while mentioning they even have miso soup. Peony opens wide, ready for that first taste of home. He takes a massive bite. As he chews, he looks like he's having a spiritual experience, leaving the others to just watch him in silence. He finally finds his voice, blushing with pure joy as he tells them how delicious it is. Tears even start to well up from the nostalgic flavor, making it clear this is way more than just a normal lunch for him. Watching his reaction, Orchid and the rabbit girl can't help but smile at the adorable sight. Soon they're all digging in, with the girl looking just as satisfied with her own meal. They finish up their food in high spirits, already joking about bringing some of these treats back for their parents. Peony suddenly snaps awake, realizing he accidentally drifted off while being carried. Patting his stomach, Orchid admits he overate because the meal was just that good, then checks his map for a weapon belt shop. When they end up in a quiet back alley, he starts wondering if they took a wrong turn. Still, he eventually stops and points toward a nearby building, certain they've finally reached the right spot. The shop he's pointing at is covered in massive roses and heart decorations. Instead of swords and armor, the display window is filled with mannequins wearing leather harnesses and masks. Peony stares at the collars and chains in silent disbelief, his face turning a bright shade of red. He can only wonder if this is actually the weapon shop they were looking for. Looking at the display windows, he sees rows of leather straps and fishnets that definitely don't look like combat gear. Sensing something is off, Orchid tells the others to wait outside while he goes in alone to check things out. Just as he enters, a flamboyant artisan in a corset and heels strikes a pose and shouts a very loud welcome. Watching from the sidelines, Peony's eyes go wide as he tries to make sense of the scene. Dharma's immediately starts gushing over the harness Orchid is carrying, calling it absolutely wonderful. Leaning in close to ask if Orchid gets the vibe, he happily waves the group further into the shop. Spotting the cute Lion Chan design, he tells Orchid to move aside so he can inspect the details. He then starts poking at Peony's thick winter layers, shocked by how sturdy the material feels. While she just stares up in curiosity, the artisan decides he could definitely make an adult version of this gear. Orchid asks if he can design a specific carrier, while Peony just stands there looking a bit overwhelmed by the shop's eccentric vibe. Staring back with an intense, sparkly look, the artisan confirms he is definitely the man for the job. He mentions that the Adventurers Guild is constantly handling rescue missions deep inside dungeons. Apparently, the guild master even visited him personally to ask for specialized equipment for those teams. When Orchid suggests a side carry style for better stability, the man is stunned by his technical knowledge. Dharma's is so impressed that he practically begs to buy the design rights, offering a licensing fee to make adult versions of the gear. Agreeing to the idea, Orchid adds one small condition. The request catches the artisan completely off guard. He gets incredibly worked up, crying tears of joy over how passionate the whole proposal feels. Just like that, the two shake hands and officially seal the deal. Dharma's gets right to work, pulling out a pile of copper-weight chains and school prep gear with a huge, dramatic grin. Proudly showing off a sturdy leather belt, he explains that this particular weapon holder is his favorite creation. Still, the toddler just stares at the various straps, wondering if they are actually meant for holding tools. Dharma's pulls out a harness with a round attachment, only to quickly admit it is probably way too early for a kid to be wearing it. Finally, when Orchid asks about a way to carry small daggers, the craftsman realizes that none of his standard sizes are going to fit someone so tiny. To fix the sizing issue, Dharma's gets right in their personal space to take some quick measurements. He even lets out a dramatic gasp, shocked by how sturdy Orchid's build is. Striking a theatrical pose, he explains he'll add plenty of adjusters so the gear can grow right along with the boy. He figures it's better to make something that lasts as Orchid's skills and weapon choices change over time. Once the plan is set, he promises to mail the finished belt later and asks for the payment. Orchid pulls out a glowing crystal card and taps it against a small box on the counter. Seeing this, Peony wonders if this fantasy world actually has its own version of digital money. She's so lost in thought that she starts absent-mindedly chewing on her hand, which just makes Dharma's coo at how cute she is. Since she doesn't know about ID cards yet, the way they just paid for everything feels like a complete mystery. Leaning in, the shopkeeper points toward her outfit and mentions something about what's inside the Lion Chan. She tilts her head in total confusion, wondering if he's talking about her actual stomach. As they finally make their exit, Dharmas lets out a dramatic, tearful goodbye that sends them both running for the hills. Once they're safely away, Orchid figures they're finally ready for the big school debut. Thinking ahead, he can't help but laugh at the idea of their mom crying nonstop when the day actually comes. She just looks confused, unable to guess why anyone would be sad about it. Since the Education Guild is right around the corner, their mother suggests they swing by to ask a few questions. This sudden change in plans has Peony looking pretty hyped. They eventually arrive at the headquarters, a massive building that looks way more like a fancy cathedral than a school office. Inside, a staff member greets them and pulls up their request for a personal tutor. She mentions that most kids wait until they're 7 to start magic training, but this little one is already showing she can mold mana. Nearby, an elegant woman notices something even more rare: the child's human heritage and those distinctive rainbow eyes. When the clerk looks a bit overwhelmed by the request, Orchid clarifies that they want someone ready by her 3rd birthday to manage her unique traits. Noticing the special circumstances, the Fox-eared guild master steps in and offers to take over the consultation herself. She introduces herself as Hydrangea, the master of the Education Guild. Standing tall with a gentle smile, she carries herself with an elegance that clearly commands the room. Looking over the situation, she offers to personally recommend the best courses for Peony's development. Orchid bows politely, feeling a lot more at ease now that an expert is handling the paperwork. Watching the professional exchange, Peony is amazed by how much more polite this place is compared to the Rowdy Adventurers Guild. Orchid sets her down on the floor so she can stand on her own 2 feet. She wobbles for a second, but quickly finds her balance, looking up at the tall woman. Suddenly, she drops into a super polite bow to show off her manners. Hydrangea praises the greeting and asks what she actually wants to learn. Naturally, the toddler looks right at Orchid to handle the talking for her, but Hydrangea stops him, telling the little girl to use her own words and gestures instead of relying on her brother. Facing the guild master alone, Peony worries if she can actually make herself understood without a translator. She starts by tensing her tiny arms as hard as she can. She finishes with a big tough pose to show that she wants to become strong. Hydrangea just looks puzzled, surrounded by question marks as she tries to figure out what the kid is doing. Seeing the shaky pose, Orchid wonders if she's actually trying to act like a little gentleman inviting them to a dance. The adults are totally missing the point, even though she's trying her hardest to look cool. Her brother claps his hands with a smile, convinced that this is just a cute performance. Frustrated that they don't get it, she starts imagining herself as a master warrior. In her head, she's already swinging swords and mastering martial arts, determined to become the strongest person around. All that mental training leaves her completely winded, huffing for air while her brother claps along to the supposed show. Hydrangea tilts her head, wondering if that was just a cute dance routine, and even Orchid chips in to agree. Frustrated by the mix-up, she shouts that she is trying to be strong. She doubles down, yelling about becoming a warrior and even asking for a sword. The adults finally get the message that she's dead serious about this dream, so Hydrangea asks for a mirror. Deciding it's time for a reality check, she leads the toddler to the glass and points out her own reflection. She explains that someone as pretty as her is destined to be a beauty, hoping to steer her away from the rough life of a fighter. The guild master keeps pushing her to pick lessons that fit her pretty face and natural talents. Looking into the mirror, she doesn't seem very happy about the suggestion, asking if she's just standing too close to see the truth. Hydrangea misses how nervous Orchid is getting in the background. He watches her closely, sensing that his sister is about to reach her limit. Looking down at the floor, her shoulders start to shake. She wonders if being human means she's just not allowed to be strong like everyone else. The tears finally spill over as she admits she just wanted to use weapons and fight like her big brother. To her, it feels like all that hard work has been a total waste of time. It's a sad sight, seeing her so defeated and slumped over. She freezes as her heart hammers against her chest, her mind racing to process what she just heard. Words start spinning around her head in a confusing blur. Sensing the panic, Orchid pulls her into a protective hug to try and ground her. Hydrangea softens her tone and suggests they focus on basic self-defense instead of heavy combat. She lists off other safe options like medicine or crafting, hoping to find a path that keeps the little girl out of danger. Since she is human, her mana is actually quite high, which opens doors for alchemy or other unique magic. Hydrangea plans to consult with the guild to find the best possible instructors for those specialized fields. She suggests starting general lessons when the girl turns 3, while putting off any physical training until she's older. Smiling warmly, she admits she is genuinely excited to see how her little guest develops over the years. That officially brings their meeting to a close. Orchid leans in and gently tells her she doesn't have to be scared anymore now that the meeting is over. He even jokes about the guy she was afraid of being a wolf instead of a dog, but the person has already left the room. Peony lets out a long breath as she bounces back from her crying fit. Seeing her feeling better, Orchid suggests they head over to the blacksmith. They soon arrive at a grand stone workshop marked by a heavy hammer sign. A blacksmith greets them behind a long counter, holding a cloth-wrapped bundle he just finished. Smiling, he explains that it's a holy sword with special enchantments to keep it from ever wearing down. As he unrolls the fabric, he admits he put extra effort into the craft, leaving the siblings in awe of the shimmering power radiating from the blade. She stares at the blade with wide, sparkling eyes, her earlier sadness completely forgotten. Clapping her small hands together, she lets out a tiny gasp of wonder at the beautiful light. This is exactly the kind of magic she dreamed of seeing. She mumbles in awe about how pretty it is, completely captivated by the shimmering metal. The blade glows with a soft, starlight energy that seems to wash away all her recent disappointment. Testing the weight, Orchid mentions that the sword fits his hand perfectly for a brand new blade. He looks down at her with a soft, watery smile, clearly relieved to see her feeling better. All her earlier frustration seems forgotten as she just stares at him with big, sparkling eyes. Suddenly, she leans in and tells him she loves him, leaving him totally frozen in shock. Once he snaps out of it, he pulls her into a tight hug. He tells her it's only natural, because he loves her more than anyone else in the world too. Looking up at him with bright eyes, she finally seems at peace. Nearby, the blacksmith watches the pair, mentioning he's just glad he picked the right materials to make her this happy. Seeing that smile makes Orchid feel like all the stress from earlier was worth it. It's a quiet, wholesome end to their trip as they get ready for whatever comes next. That peace doesn't last long, though, because it's finally time for Orchid to head off to his first day at the academy. Peony starts wailing at the top of her lungs, putting on a huge performance about how she doesn't want her big brother to leave. Clinging to his leg for dear life, she lets out a massive sob while Orchid just stands there in his new uniform looking completely stuck. Even their father can only watch from the sidelines. Figuring this was bound to happen eventually, the secret is out. She is actually using water magic to pump up those massive tears. Giving a sneaky little smirk, she knows exactly how to play her family for sympathy. While her father heads off to work with a cheerful wave, Orchid stands there looking completely drained by the morning drama. Seeing an opening, she ramps up the crying even harder and demands to be carried. Before he can even figure out the baby carrier, their mother swoops in and scoops her up. The whole performance comes to a sudden halt as she gets hauled away, looking a little surprised her trick got cut short. Orchid waves goodbye, promising to hurry back while the little girl keeps shouting after him as the door shuts. To help her feel better, Mother offers up his pajamas as a consolation prize, mentioning they still have his scent. Hugging the clothes, she can't help but feel like the whole gesture is just a bit creepy. Her mind drifts back to last night when she got caught trying to hide his school books, wishing she'd actually pulled it off so she had something interesting to study. Since she has no magic homework of her own, she settles for flipping through her usual picture books instead. Time just crawls by. She lets out a massive yawn, thinking about how bored she is. When her mother notices the slump, she asks if things feel lonely with Orchid gone. Buried in the borrowed pajamas, she realizes it will be a long time before he finally gets home. Her mother tries to cheer things up by offering to read one of the picture books. Since she doesn't actually like these simple stories, she figures she should just play along to keep her mom happy. Mom notices the clock and realizes it's already time for lunch. Hearing they're having omoris, the little girl cheers with all her energy. Soon enough, a steaming plate of food is served up. As Mom tries to teach her how to grip the spoon properly, she focuses hard on the task. Suddenly, she catches herself sitting with her mouth wide open, waiting for a bite that isn't coming. It hits her that she's so used to her brother feeding her that her body just expects it automatically, without him there to help. She fumbles with the utensil and realizes it's going to take a long time to finish this meal. Eventually, she just gives up, slumping over and admitting she's way too tired to keep eating. Her mom just laughs and uses a quick clean spell to wipe her face in a second. Watching the plates get cleared away, Peony pouts a little, thinking she could have handled the cleaning magic herself. She wanders off feeling a bit restless, really missing the comfort of her brother's fluffy tail. But then, a light bulb goes off in her head as she realizes that since he's gone, she finally has the perfect chance to practice her secret magic without getting caught. She starts by doing some awkward stretches, thinking that since she's finally alone, she can get some real training done. Remembering how her family usually stops her from moving around too much, she figures being 3 years old means she's ready for a challenge. Waddling over to the staircase, she decides the steps are the perfect place to test her limits. She checks both ways to make sure the coast is absolutely clear. Striking a confident pose, she lets out a determined little cheer and prepares to dive in. She starts crawling up the steps, finding that she can move much smoother than she expected. Just as she's getting into a rhythm, Orchid suddenly scoops her up with a big greeting, looking a bit out of breath from rushing home. Their mom mentions how early it is, and he explains he only had a quick test and a school tour today, so he was done by noon. Handing her a little snack, he reminds her that the stairs are too dangerous to handle alone and promises to climb them with her from now on. That new routine starts the very next day with her wailing on the floor, making it nearly impossible for him to leave for class. By the following morning, she is still clinging to his neck and sobbing as he tries to head out the door. Eventually, she manages to stop the constant crying, even if her face is still stuck in a jump out. Since he can't exactly bring a toddler to a magic academy, she has to wait at home for his return. When Orchid finally gets back, he sits her down and tells her everything about his lessons and his new teacher. Listening to his school talk is basically a free education, so she pays close attention to every word. A month flies by, and she's already practicing her grip by crushing solid pebbles with her bare hands. Before long, she even gets her own private tutor to help her catch up on the basics. Meanwhile, Orchid is hanging out in the garden and thanking his father for helping him gather some supplies. He admits he couldn't find the right stones on his own since he doesn't have an earth affinity. As they head back, they confirm that an alchemy teacher has finally been chosen to give her lessons right here in the courtyard. Orchid looks genuinely stressed, claiming that even a tiny trip would be a disaster for her. When his dad tells him he's overthinking things, he fires back that a single loose pebble could fly into her eye if she fell. Watching them argue over her safety makes her feel pretty special, knowing they're going through all this trouble for her. Inspired by their hard work, she decides to start her own little warm-up routine on the grass. As she wiggles around, her dad asks when the lessons start, and it turns out a specialist from the Central Research Institute is coming next week. Thinking about the upcoming lessons, Orchid decides to give his sister a little pop quiz. He asks if she remembers anything about Central, pointing a finger up to show he's serious about the review. The place is a massive research hub that handles all the important discoveries for the kingdom. While Peony rolls around on the floor, he mentions how researchers even team up with adventurers to explore dangerous dungeons. Others focus on inventing new magic tools and food to supply the different guilds. Orchid mentions that the biggest group of scholars at Central actually focuses on making potions. Flexing his arm with a grin, he reminds Peony that their dad works there too, though not as a scientist. He's part of the security team that keeps the place safe. While she kicks her feet in the air, he explains that Dad spends his time guarding important research data and magic tools from potential thieves. He adds that Dad even has to protect honest researchers from bad ones, which leaves Peony wondering what kind of trouble happens inside that facility. He explains that a while back, some researchers were looking into how children are born, but they really struggled to find people to help them with the study. She stares at him with wide, blank eyes while she tries to process that. Waving his hands in a panic, he adds that some of them even tried making love potions to use on random visitors to the facility. Just then, Mom steps in and scoops up the little girl, asking with a sharp smile exactly what kind of stories he thinks he's telling. He drops to the floor in a heap as she clarifies that those researchers were actually using a type of hypnosis to control people. She says those researchers were actually caught trying to harvest DNA from people. Apparently, they used sleeping medicine to collect biological samples from anyone who visited. Laughing, Mom mentions that researchers are talented but occasionally get way too obsessed with their experiments. Still, Orchid keeps muttering to himself, planning to send a warning letter the second he sees anything suspicious. Seeing her do a sumo-style stomp, he warns her to stop that manly dance before she hurts herself. Eventually, he snaps out of his panic when he notices his sister striking a bizarre pose on the floor. The family's antics are cut short when the new tutor finally arrives at the house. Looking a bit scruffy in his cloak and sandals, he introduces himself as Jape from the Central Research Institute. Giving a deep, formal bow, he says he'll be in their care from now on. While standing back up, he admits that teaching a human is actually a first for him. Peony stares at him so intensely that he starts checking his hair, wondering if he's got something stuck in it. He leads everyone out to the courtyard, deciding it's best to just dive right into the lesson. Leaning down, he asks if she can produce a bit of water to show him what she's got. She is ready for the challenge, considering she already uses water magic to wash up every morning. She holds her tiny hands out, focusing as hard as a toddler can. Just like that, a perfectly round orb of water pops into existence right in front of her. Jape studies the floating sphere, nodding to himself as if he's testing its purity. He admits the quality is incredible, mentioning it's actually on the level of holy water. Hearing that makes her freeze, wondering if she accidentally showed off way too much power, since some high-end medicines require that specific grade. He explains he can now teach her much more advanced alchemy. She looks up at him with sparkling eyes, totally hooked on the idea. Switching gears, he crouches down to show her how to prepare the soil for growing medicinal herbs. He invites her to try it herself, and she's more than ready to jump in and get her hands dirty. They start digging into the garden together while Mom watches from the window to make sure things are going okay. Eventually, he stands up to demonstrate some specific gestures, explaining how magic and movement need to sync up. With a flick of his wrist, he sends a swirl of leaves and stars dancing through the air to show her what's possible. Peony's eyes light up as she reaches out for the glowing orbs, looking like she's just found a brand new obsession. Her mom watches with a gentle smile, happy to see her daughter so focused on the task. Suddenly, the front door slams open as Orchid shouts for her the second he steps inside. He rushes over to scoop her up, frantically asking if that teacher from Central did anything weird. Still confused, Peony just stares back, wondering why her brother is in such a panic. Seeing him so wound up, Mom calmly explains that the teacher was a bit quirky but decent. He pulls his sister close and asks what she actually learned, though she just gives him some excited sound effects about digging in the soil. Watching her face closely, he remains suspicious of any weird influence or hidden motives. While Mom brings out some snacks, he continues the grilling, even asking if the man tried to touch her. Laughing at the paranoia, she reminds him that the teacher was actually very professional. As night falls over the house, the frantic questioning finally starts to settle down. She brushes her brother's tail while he relaxes, and he gives her a quick thanks for the help. Soon, she pulls a thick, heavy-looking tome from the shelf. Orchid rushes over to take the weight, telling her that it's way too heavy for a toddler to carry. Flipping through the pages, she scans the complicated diagrams and lists of strange ingredients. A picture of an alchemist at a giant cauldron catches her eye, making her realize that making real medicine takes some serious equipment. She wonders where they would even find the room for a massive pot in their house. Still, her eyes start to sparkle as the idea takes root. Looking at the prices of alchemy sets, her brother starts to sweat, while she just stares at the book, already deep in thought. Tucker-chan starts gathering his things for school, while she keeps watching those textbooks with a very specific plan in mind, explaining that classes start tomorrow. He double-checks his bag to make sure he isn't forgetting anything. When she asks if they can go together, her big eyes make him wince with guilt. He tells her he's sorry, but she has to stay behind and watch the house this time. Clearly not happy with that answer, she starts crawling around the floor with some extra loud thumps to show her frustration. While he gets distracted looking for his gear, she quietly